Hello students, my name is Vaishali. I'm a faculty in School of Finance and Commerce, Galgotia's University, and I welcome you all to this presentation. The name of the topic is Business Ethics. So let's get started. The topics discussed are meaning of business ethics, then we would discuss different types of ethical dilemmas that a business faces. Then different approaches to ethics will be discussed in detail, and finally we'll conclude with enlisting the importance of ethics to individual and to the organization. So let's start by defining the term ethics. So we can say that ethics is the system of moral principles and it examines the concept of right and wrong. And business ethics is the application of ethical values to business behavior. Now, whether an action is considered to be right or wrong would normally depend on a number of different factors. For example, the consequences of your action. Does the end justify the means? Then, what was the motivation behind that action? Guiding principles like treating others as you would want to be treated. Then other key values, for example, importance of human rights. So to give you an example of ethical dilemma faced at workplace, now suppose you discovered that a colleague at your work has been stealing from the company. Okay, now what do you do about this situation? Do you report it to the management, which would of course can lead to the dismissal and loss to the friend? Then do you keep quiet and maybe you are risking being punished if the knowledge of the situation becomes clear later? Then do you urge the whatever wrong they have done? And does the concept of right and wrong depends on the size of the theft? Suppose they've just stolen something worth of rupees 1 or rupees 1000 or 10,000. So does the monetary amount will make a difference? Or now does it depend you are friendly with that employee or not? So this is an example of all the ethical problems that require moral judgments on your part. And of course, these are extremely difficult situations and these depend on a lot of factors. Next, let's define the term ethical dilemmas and types of dilemmas. So, an ethical dilemma involves a situation in which the decision maker has to decide what is the right or wrong thing to do. Now, ethical dilemmas can be found out throughout every aspect of business. So, let's start discussing the different aspects of business where these issues. The ethical dilemma could be whether you should be doing some creative accounting to boost your reported profits. Then there could be ethical dilemma regarding director's pay, whether the director should be receiving very large amount of money even if the company is performing poorly. Then should be paid to facilitate some contracts, especially in countries. Then another ethical dilemma is insider trading. Now suppose director can be tempted to buy share, already know the favorable situation which is going to take place in the future and that could boost the share price. So these are some of the examples of accounting issues where ethical dilemmas are faced. Then ethical dilemmas related to production issues could be, now whether a company should be producing certain kinds of products like tobacco, alcohol, or alcoholic drinks which are aimed at teenagers. Another dilemma could be, should the company be concerned about the effects of the product on environment? Then, should the company be testing its products on animals or not? Okay. Now then, some of these sales and marketing related issues could be how they should be fixing their price, and what if they are indulging in some anti-competitive behaviors. Then whether it is it ethical to target advertising at children, like for fast food or expensive toys. Then should the products be advertised by sending spam emails? These are some of the ethical dilemmas that are faced at sales and marketing level. In same way, even there are ethical dilemmas when it comes to HRM issues. Like for example, should the employees be favored or discriminated on the basis of gender, race, religion, age, etc.? Then the contract of employment could be another issue. What if it does not have a fair balance of power between the employees and the employer? Then the workplace, how should the workplace be, whether it should be safe and healthy for the employees or not? So these are some of the HRM issues. Now, since making ethical decision is not an easy process and individuals find themselves to be in ethical dilemma, as of course they are not sure as to what is the correct action they need to take. So there are several approaches to making these decisions. Let's discuss these approaches. First is consequentialist versus pluralist approach. So under consequentialist approach, it says that a decision is right or wrong depending on the consequences or outcomes of that decision. So suppose the outcome is right, then action is irrelevant. So let's look at an example. Now suppose there is an individual who needs to feed his family. So here if he steals the food, then it can be seen as morally acceptable if there is no other way of obtaining the food. Next is pluralist approach. This approach says that the need of all the stakeholders should be looked into and no compromise should be done for the interest of any of the group. Now for example, if there is a mining company and it wishes to open a new mine so that it can access mineral deposits and earn its shareholders a larger profit. Now here the local residents are unhappy because of course it will increase the pollution that is caused by the mine. So a pluralist approach here would be to open the mine, but at the same time ensure that enough money is spent to minimize the damage to the local environment. And also perhaps giving them a guarantee that the site will be fully restored once mining operations have ceased. So this is a pluralist approach because it is looking at the benefit of all the stakeholders. Next is relativist versus absolutist. So under relativist approach, it says that there is no universal moral code which is available to judge all the actions. So this means that now whether something is ethical or not will depend on the circumstances. Now let's take the same case where a person stole bread to feed the starving family. So here relativist will argue that different people will have different view on this. Now some may justify the stealing act, while others can say that stealing is never justified. So the biggest strength of this approach, relativist, is that it accepts that different people and cultures will have different view on what is right and what is wrong. So for organizations that operate internationally, for them, this allows them to have a greater flexibility when deciding what is right and what is wrong. And they can be more responsive to local attitudes. Now the one thing that is not right with this approach is that it is often argued that relativism is an excuse for organizations and individuals to do whatever they like and continue with unethical practices in the name of. Another approach, absolutism. Now this approach says that there are certain actions that are inherently right or wrong regardless of their context or circumstances in which they occur. So now, for example, absolutist would always regard taking life of a human as entirely unacceptable regardless of the context, circumstances, whether it was murder or in self-defense, anything. He will never justify taking life of a human. So the main strength of an absolutist is that it provides a framework of rules that are easy for individuals and companies to follow. Now, the thing that is not clear with this approach is that whether absolutists should find this framework of ethical rules according to religion, or what should be the basis of framing these rules. So absolutism may also lead to problems as it can create conflict with each other. Now that we have discussed the different approaches to ethics in business, now let's look at its application through an example. Now imagine you are a company that runs a large chain of supermarkets and you have identified an opportunity to expand into a new country, let's say country X. And this expansion will create large number of local jobs and is also expected to earn you significant profits. Now here's a condition. The local officials in that new country say that it is very important to pay bribe there if you want certain planning permissions from the authorities. And this is a very common practice in country X, to pay bribes to the official to get work done. However, paying bribes in your home country is illegal. Now what should you do? Let's try to find the answer under different approaches to ethics that we just discussed. Now for example, under consequentialist approach, your decision will depend on the consequences of paying the bribe. So here you can still justify paying the bribe as you will earn a significant profit from the venture. Now under pluralist approach, the pluralist approach would look at ensuring that the needs of none of your shareholders are seriously compromised if you are paying the bribe. So now when you pay the bribe, of course there will be some loss to your shareholders, but at the same time there are high chances that they will gain from paying this bribe. So on and all, under pluralist approach, everyone benefits from paying the bribe. Now relativist approach would look at the context of the decision to pay the bribe. So in this case, bribe is common in country X, so we can be flexible with our approach and may consider paying the bribe. Now let's consider the absolutist approach. So absolutist approach would look at whether paying the bribe is fundamentally correct or not. So as we just said that in this case, bribery is illegal in our home country. So an absolutist would say that paying bribe to the officials in country G is inappropriate and is wrong. If it is wrong paying bribe in our home country, it is the same principle applies to another country also. So this is how we can get different answers under different approaches with regard to solving an ethical problem. Now let's look at the importance of business ethics. As we all know that businesses are a part of the society, and society expects its individuals to behave properly, and similarly it expects companies to operate on certain standards. So business ethics is important to both the organization as well as the individual. So for the organization, the good ethics are always seen as driver of profitability, and business should not consider them as burden. A good ethical framework is part of good corporate governance, and it gives a hint that it has a well-run business. The investors are also assured about the company's approach to risk management, and employees are motivated because they are in the knowledge that they are operating in an environment of good ethical corporate behavior. So on the basis of these reasons, ethics are important for the organization. Now if we talk about the individual, the consumer and employee expectations have evolved over the years, and consumers may choose to purchase ethical items, and employees will not blindly accept orders to act in a manner that they personally believe are unethical. So ethics are important even at individual level. So we have come to the end of the presentation. I thank you all for hearing me out patiently, and here on the screen you can see some of the references that I have used, and you can also use to further enhance your knowledge on the subject. I thank you all once again.